Welcome back to the Bellman Report, everyone. It has been some time. I do apologise for that. As I've said in the past on the Bellman Report, I am mostly now doing the 8 News Show podcast. So that's why you haven't been seeing so much from me on this channel. Now, I have been putting a lot of thought into that, and I'll just tell you up front that I think what's going to end up happening is I'm going to change the name of this channel so that I can just move forward with one brand name. But anyway, today is the Monday, the 10th of October, and of course tomorrow we've got in the WA Parliament, we've got this draconian bill being passed through the upper house, or they're going to attempt to pass it through the upper house, and it's called the Emergency Management Amendment Bill of 2022, in brackets, the Temporary COVID-19 Provisions. Now, I've got Rosie Cornell with me today to discuss this very issue. Let me just bring you onto screen there, Rosie. Hi, Rosie. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you going, Andrew?
Great, thank you. Now, of course, Rosie, we've had some extensive conversations about this this dictatorial bill, and a lot of people are saying on the street that this is a conspiracy theory, believe it or not.
I love conspiracy theories, especially when they are in the Parliament.
Yeah, we had a few of these yesterday, and even though, I was out with a few people at the Redfern train station in Perth yesterday. Sorry, not Redfern, Redcliffe. This is a new airport link train station, and our wonderful Premier, Mr. Mark McGowan, was there, and I might just throw in a couple of scenes from yesterday, everyone. So let me just throw that in there. So me making asking Mark a couple of hard questions.
Myocarditis. Yeah, you're very proud of all the injuries you've caused there, Mark. Are you proud of all the injuries that you've caused? Are you proud of the injuries? Are you proud of all the damage to the children that you've done?
Rosie, there are a couple of sections in this bill that are absolutely outrageous, and they're outrageous for several reasons, mainly because they don't actually clarify the circumstances around which they're talking. And one of the most draconian ones is it section 77M? I'm going to throw that up on screen for people right now. So Rosie, let's go through 77M of this emergency amendment bill. Powers to control and use property and related powers. Rosie, tell us all about this one, because it sounds like they're giving themselves the power to seize our property, whatever that may be.
See, what could possibly go wrong with a bill that gives police officers the right to break and enter into any property to do whatever they like for no reason? Like, oh, look, did I tell you the history of this? I think we might need to backpedal. So, I was telling you how quickly this went through the Parliament. So it's already gone through the Legislative Assembly. So I told you that it was actually tabled, so introduced on the 21st of September. Mm-hmm. The first reading happened on the 21st of September. So second reading, 21st September. The second reading agreed, 21st of September. The consideration in detail, now this was in detail, on the 21st of September, and the third reading on the 21st of September.
So, Rose, do you think it would be outrageous of me to say that not one of the ministers actually read that bill?
Have you seen the video of them considering this bill? It
I
seemed to
haven't.
be a very, very empty chambers.
Isn't it incredible that something like this can happen underneath the noses of not just the public, but the ministers themselves?
See,
I honestly can't understand how this could happen.
the problem is that the Labor Party votes the Labor Party. When you vote in a Labor Party politician, you vote in Labor policies. It doesn't matter what your personal view is. And this is where I keep arguing with people. Vote for somebody, a candidate who says, I'm going to ask you what the community wants, because my job as a representative in Parliament is to bring your whole concepts into the Parliament. The Parliament is not there to treat citizens as property. We are not the property of the government. The government is our employee.
I think it's fair to say that that would be the expectation.
That's
Every
definitely not
member,
what you get.
any thinking member of the public would expect that, but that's the opposite of what we get.
I actually phoned Alana McTiernan's office because she's my MLC, or one of them.
Public member.
And I was absolutely assured that Miss McTiernan will vote the party line. So I did a bit of a rant at poor old guy. I do apologise to him. But I get really, really upset with all of this. And I mean, remember how I said that they really, they considered this bill in detail. I've been going through this bill since I first got a hold of it, once it was published on the website. And it took me until yesterday to come up with some of these questions. So the things that aren't clarified in the document. So for this one, I don't actually want to talk about the bill itself. I want to talk about the problems with it. So I've written down. I've written down about 13 odd questions that I would just like everybody to ask. And I want the politicians tomorrow to tell us the answer, because we need these answers before they bring this in as law.
Well, tell us about some of those things, Rosie.
Okay, so this bill, and I know that it is happening because Serco has been given the contract to employ staff to run the Bullsbrook. They call it the quarantine centre, and I'm going to call it what it is. It's a concentration camp. And let me expand why I think it's a concentration camp.
Yep.
Because with a quarantine centre, when you go into quarantine, the first thing you know is how long you've got to be there. There is no mention of a time in quarantine in this. And then what's really, really horrific,
you just get dragged away, and then I'm just going to make an assumption that this bill's been written in such a way that leaves the police officers or the officers or authoritarians who are running the concentration camp, i.e. Bullsbrook, that this bill's going to give them the power to make the decision when you leave that facility.
Yep, and there's no way that well, how do we avoid going into the quarantine? What do we have to do to not be subject to quarantine so that we can stay at home? And remembering that the Australian government has said nobody needs to isolate for this virus anymore.
Well,
if
apparently the
virus
is over, Rosie. But instead, we've got this bill being put in front of us to give the police more power than what they had during the pandemic. Now that the pandemic
everything that was bad about the pandemic over the last 2.5 years is covered in this bill, and they can do it without really letting you know. Yeah. They don't have to advertise it anywhere. So they can just say, oops, sorry, we forgot to tell you. Doesn't mean it's not legitimate.
Yeah. And that's it. Yeah. So I've got a couple of questions, Rosie. What happens if the police decide to exercise these powers to control and use your property. Now, I need to ask you a couple of questions about this. But does that include a business property, or is that just private homes?
No, they can seize. Well, I use the word seize because to me, the use of the term control of means that they essentially have it. And there's no end point to that either. They don't say, we have control of your car. And look, I really have to say it again. I do not understand the science behind this. How does seizing control of my car, my home, my business, or whatever, how does that stop the spread of the Rona? All it does is put me under more stress.
That's right.
Now,
Rosie.
my mental health is covered in the Public Health Act. They are supposed to ensure that all measures also protect my mental health. And I can tell you, I am having a really, really hard time not to lose my composure in this because this is so bad. This is authoritarianism on speed. I'm not sure what drugs go around in Parliament House, but they must be really, really good for anyone to think that this is a good thing.
There's some pretty good gear.
Must be. And I know nothing about drugs because I've never done them, but by God, they must be good. And I might need some of those because this is Alice in Wonderland bad.
Well, Rosie, the devil is in the detail that's missing.
That's right.
For any person who's sitting here watching this thinking, oh yeah, where's your proof? You can go and download the bill. I'll put a link to the bill from the government website itself in this video, so that in the description below, so that you can look this up for yourself. But just reading through it, you'll find very quickly that there's all kinds of mention of what they can do, but there's no limitation put on it. So, Rosie, here's the next part of the question that I was asking you before. Let's say that they come in and they seize you, Rosie. You're at home doing your video podcast with Andrew on the Bellman Report, and you've got a couple of beautiful little dogs there at your house. What happens to them when they literally walk in, take over your property, drag you off to the the concentration camp at Bullsbrook here in Western Australia? What happens to your pets? I mean, I know those dogs are going to be barking there. They're going to be going off their dial, barking at the police. We've all seen the movies. We know what happens. Is that what goes through your mind when you think about that, or you think about somebody who has small children in their house, who sees what happens to the kids, and what happens to the pets? Just keep it that level that everyone can relate to.
Look, yesterday I was speaking to someone, and I sort of said, "Well, what are they going to do with our pets?" Because there's nothing mentioned about, oh, by the way, if you have animals, we're going to look after them while we've got you in quarantine, instead of letting you recover at home.
Oh,
and
I'm sure they're going to look.
You know what this guy told me?
Well, yeah.
Do you remember when the spy case was on in England, where the spy was poisoned?
Yep, and it was blamed on Putin.
And you know what I didn't know? And I literally lost the plot for a few hours yesterday, because the guy said what they did is they sealed off the house. They put the tape across the house, and 2 weeks later, when they took the tape off, they went inside, and the cat, the birds, and the fish were dead. Oh, fuck. These people have zero compassion for anything or anybody.
Look, Rosie, my mind goes...
What do we do?
My mind goes directly to some of the encounters that I've had with the police over the last 8 to 9 months, and some of the things that I've seen. Now, I've seen some amazing police officers who are the most reasonable and honourable people that you would ever want to meet in the street. Yeah. I've also seen a couple, particularly one particular man who gets around wearing shorts, which which I think is a bit odd. But he is clearly vying for an upper position and willing to do whatever he's asked to do. And so I've witnessed this man literally trying to pull pranks on people with letters that are written to an organisation claiming that this is a letter of evidence that says that they can arrest somebody, for example. Now,
I would love to get a hold of those letters,
I
because
know I'm
you
being
know
a
what?
little bit mysterious for the audience, but I can't just come out and say it. Let's just say that I've witnessed police making shit up on more than one occasion.
Can I just say that when a government has policies that strike at the very heart of people's being, then you are going to lose if you are going to instruct police officers to not serve and protect the people, but to harass, intimidate, and convict the people, then you are going to lose your moral and ethical compass.
Well,
in
Rosie,
the
they've
force.
certainly
And they're gone.
They've lost the moral high ground. They've broken their social contract with all of the people.
Absolutely.
And the outcomes of that, I believe, is, you start seeing civil unrest. But I believe that this is exactly where they want us.
That's what they want. They want us all to go to, well, we're going to solve the problem ourselves, because the courts are obviously not doing it. And I'm so disappointed with the legal profession. I can't express how disappointed I am. I've looked for the Law Society coming out and saying, you can't do this. I've looked for the Legal Practice Board coming out and saying, oh my God, you can't do this. But our top legal mind is supposed to be the Attorney General, and it's our Attorney General who is proven in a New South Wales court to not be quite all that. And he is assisting Mr. McGowan in bringing in a totalitarian government.
Well,
do you know what the effect of this law is? Well, because that's what we need to look at. What is the effect of a law that says if we declare a COVID-19 emergency at the middle of nowhere, northeast of Whoop Whoop, and everybody in Perth thinks, oh, those poor buggers, locked down again. We're so lucky here. This act will apply everywhere, in every minor area. It's wherever, the whole of Western Australia, and it doesn't matter where your property is. So what I envision,
Daddy McGowan wants to make it is where it'll be.
So, Andrew, I've told you a lot about my dad and the fact that I was raised every day. My childhood was not a happy childhood, not because my parents didn't love me, but my parents were so traumatized in Germany in the 1930s and 40s that I grew up hearing about what a certain insignificant politician in Germany did to the population. They were so scared. They were terrified. Their solution to everything was, well, what can you do about it? Because as kids, there was nothing they could do about it. And this act, if this bill passes and becomes law in Western Australia, Western Australians, you've got to wake up, because this is...
Urgently.
I went through all of the laws that were brought in and when they were brought in. Do you know the time frame that it took for this person and his government to bring in all of the laws that made everything that they did during the war legal? How many years do you reckon it was? 1, 2?
No, I think it was only about 6 months, wasn't it?
No. It started in 1933, and the final bad laws weren't passed until 1942.
Right.
Our esteemed Premier and his
done this.
And his legal sidekick, and I will probably not be a lawyer much longer, so all donations greatly appreciated. But I
So,
can't
yeah.
respect an Attorney General who has no respect for the rule of law, no respect for
Look,
democracy, no respect for the courts.
Rosie, I was when you mentioned that earlier, I was going to just bring up a conversation that Graham. You can go and look this up publicly. Graham Hoodie of Hoodie's Heroes, has mentioned a conversation that he had with the Governor General when he was up in Queensland
The
trying to help
Attorney
with
General?
the Attorney General,
Yeah.
when he was up there trying to assist with the flood relief effort. And the Attorney General said to him that he'd been, what are you talking about, mate? The people voted with their feet. And Hoodie had the nous to mention the fact that, well, what are you talking about, mate? Everyone was forced to do it. You lose your job if you don't do it. Like we all did. Rosie, you were a lawyer working for a firm. You lost your job. I was a fly and flat mining lawyer.
I did not lose my job
So you
through the
resigned.
mandates, but I couldn't get another job in Western Australia, which is why I now work for a Queensland law firm.
Right. Yes.
So I actually quit my job. Brilliant boss. She was lovely, or is lovely. God, that's a terrible way to put it. My boss is lovely. My former boss, my new boss is lovely. But I quit because I wanted to concentrate on this, because my husband, I feel, is at risk from these jabs, because he has a couple of conditions, but it turns out that he was put on gout medication a few years back, and guess what they give you to treat myocarditis and pericarditis?
Yeah, the same thing.
The same thing. So I'm sort of thinking, well, maybe he had a bit of protection, but he has not been well since getting the jabs. I can't say that's what caused it. I absolutely cannot point to it, but certainly other people who have reported jab injuries, what is wrong with him aligns with the Pfizer documents about common side effects.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening to this saying, "Oh, what are you talking about? There aren't that many injuries." I'm sorry, there are a hell of a lot of injuries.
there are far more, and I've met a lot of nurses.
Over 10 times more people have died from the jabs than have actually died from Rona.
And every time somebody speaks out about it, you're nothing but a conspiracy theorist. And I mean, they're talking about this now. And you know how I talked about the rule of law? You know that the rule of law means that every law you bring in applies to everybody equally, including the person who brings it in.
Yeah.
So one of the questions that I've got for Mr. McGowan and all of the other politicians, they've given themselves indemnity from criminal charges, but are they going to apply the concentration camp law to themselves? So
No,
if Mr. McGowan gets COVID, is he going to be in his mansion, or is he going to be in the camps out with the plebs?
Well,
because
gee,
not in the camps with the plebs. I've got a problem with that.
Gee, I wonder exactly where it'll be.
And it's not being disrespectful. These are the questions that they needed to answer before voting for it. These are serious questions.
Yeah.
Who is going to be locked up? Like, one of the things here is, how do we avoid quarantine? What do we have to do so that we're not at risk of them breaking down our doors at 3 o'clock in the morning, shooting our dogs and dragging us off to the quarantine?
Rosie, that's the underlying question that I've had. Just what is it that can bring this upon you? But I don't believe there's any mention of that in this bill.
I don't see anywhere. I have read through this, and I've read through the Public Health Act and the Emergency Management Act and all of the other acts that are affected, and and there are no answers. I mean, under the Public Health Act, they get to charge us for our luxury stay in the concentration camp.
Isn't it lovely of them?
So, so we're going to be paying a mortgage on a perfectly good bedroom where we can lie down at night, a perfectly good kitchen where we can look after ourselves. We're going to be paying that mortgage and then paying luxury holiday rates to stay in a concentration camp because we can't leave it, we can't tour, we can't do anything.
Because, Rose, that is one thing that they've put in the bill, that you will be paying for your stay.
And that's actually not in the emergency bill. To find that clause, you've got to go to the Public Health Act. How many people read all of the acts?
And that's right. And that's where they're really catching us out. Look, Rosie, we've been going for an hour.
And you've only covered one of my questions that I had in my list.
Questions. So I think it would be great to get together to do a podcast on this so we can really drill down into it a little bit more.
Yeah.
Would you be interested in doing that?
Yeah, I'll try not to cry because I tell you, this is so hard for me because, as I say, I've lived this vicariously through my mum and dad's stories. And when I was 7, I remember in primary school in Germany, they decided that no child should ever forget what happened in the Holocaust. And they showed us a documentary that was shot when the Americans came in and liberated all of the camps. And I have a burning photo of all of the people that were naked. They were skin and bone, barely functional human beings.
And Rosie,
that's traumatic.
I mean, look, we've got to go, but look, I'd just like to add to that because as a child, I watched a lot of those documentaries, and especially when the internet first came out, they were the sorts of things that I was looking up, stuff about the Nazis and blah, blah, blah. And the point I'd like to make is that this stuff children aren't taught about this stuff anymore. And of course, it's all been censored off the internet now. You can't go and just look up. I've seen Nazi experiments where they've injected a person with a massive dose of fluoride, which makes you compliant, everybody. If you're wondering why fluoride's in the water, it's not for your teeth. I know everyone's going to call me a conspiracy theorist for that, but you can certainly go and do some research of your own. But I've seen video footage of a Jewish person in one of these concentration camps literally having the skin burnt off their arm by a Bunsen burner and saying that it felt okay to them because they were on such a high dose. And, that's been burnt into my mind ever since, and some of the other things, like the things that you were mentioning. So how anyone can think that a bill like this hasn't got problems surrounding it, you're crazy. You don't know your history. Knowing your history is the most important thing a person could do. So look, Rosie, with that, we've got to get going. So thank you so much, everyone. We'll do a podcast on the 8 News Show. As I mentioned, the 8 News Show is the podcast that I run. We're on most of the podcast apps, certainly on the Google, the Apple, definitely on Podbean. That's where we're hosted. So please keep an eye out for that. And if you'd like reference to any of the things that we've been talking about in regards to the injuries that have been caused, all you've got to do is go to the 8 News Show podcast and look up the Jab Injured series. There are 9 episodes there at the moment, and that'll tell you everything you need to know. So with that, thank you for joining us today, everyone. Thank you so much for being with me, Rosie. And until the next time, goodbye.